Alejandro on stage.
Okay, thank you. Well, welcome everyone, and thanks so much for coming. Today, the talk is going to be all about being critical and why we shouldn't be searching for answers. And I know that sounds a lot like clickbait. Promise you it's not, just bear with me and we'll get there. But first, we have to recognize that it's a Friday morning and we're all probably quite low energy. And there's a good chance that at least some of us were partying last night. Yeah, I'm looking at you with the eye bags, I've been there too. So let's quickly get energized by doing a quick poll, okay? If you came here this morning in search of some answers, just stand up with me. No need to be shy. All right, a couple people. All right, maybe 25% of the room. If you came here, stay standing, because we're all going to stand together, hopefully, fingers crossed. If you came here looking to ask some questions, right, to learn a little bit more, also stand up. Hopefully all of us, more or less, should be getting there. Okay, cool. Since we're all standing together now, everyone put your feet together and take like a little 6-inch shuffle forwards with me, okay? All right, and then where you are, keep your feet there, and then just like hover back down, and then you should find the border of your seat, right? And then just stay right there. Okay, cool. All right, now that I have you all on the edge of your seat, let's get this presentation going. So, now that I have your attention, my name is Alejandro. I am the co-founder of UMore, and UMore is a mental health app that helps people measure and monitor their mental health. And we try to be super, super critical in the way in which we develop this app, our product development process. And today we're going to speak about exactly how we do that with this super awesome app. But we're going to get there later. To start with, I want to ask, what does it actually mean to be critical? And that's what today's theme is, so this is what we're going to explore. And to start with, we're going to do the least critical thing possible and just ask Google, okay? What does it mean? And Google defines critical thinking as the objective analysis and evaluation of an issue in order to find a judgment, right? So let's take a look at that word, judgment, okay? A judgment is an assumption. It's a sort of guess, like an attempt to reach an answer. But I guess that might be assumed what the point of critical thinking is, right? The pursuit of answers, the pursuit of truth. But the question that I have is that, is this truly the case? Are judgments really answers? And to explore this, I thought we might do a quick thought experiment to put this to the test. So I want to introduce you to 5 of my friends. They're 5 psychologists, and they're all super smart, but that's exactly their problem. They're all super smart within their own rights. So if I were to ask them, why did I eat breakfast this morning? They might all come back with their own theories, right? Over here, we've got the behavioral psychologist who spends his time doing experiments with labs, with rats, like giving them a bunch of sort of tests to do. And he might say that I was conditioned with positive reinforcement to eat breakfast this morning. But then the cognitive psychologist comes along and he's like, wait, hold up. I think that I was conditioned with, I think that my brain picked up on signals from my stomach, which then directed my attention to the food, and that's why I ate breakfast this morning. But then the evolutionary psychologist comes on, he's like, you guys have got it all wrong, okay? Eating breakfast provided you with energy, which then increased the chances of collecting resources, which gave you status and power, which made it more likely for you to pass on your genes. And then this guy, the neuroscientist, comes on, and he's like, wait, you're all wrong, okay? Your brain is hardwired to seek out dopamine, and when it detected that, it needed to go and establish a new pleasure, so therefore you went to eat food in order to get that quick buzz. And then we have the psychoanalyst who's like, oh, you ate toast for some reason because you envy your father's penis. I don't know, this guy's kind of kooky. But the point is that all 5 of them, if we assume they're correct, who is actually thinking critically? But I said, who is the most critical out of those 5 giving answers? Which one of them is the closest to the truth? Here's another question. What if we assumed that there was no such thing as truths, no such thing as answers? What if the way in which we thought about questions and answered were balanced? Okay, and here's another question. You can probably see that there's a theme developing here. What if we saw that in the world, we put more importance on asking questions instead of looking for answers? What would happen then? So let's return to the psychologists in an unfamiliar situation, but with a different perspective. Let's rephrase their answers that they gave into questions. And you see what happens when we do this. Suddenly, we can invert the conclusion, and it seems like these guys can now start getting along as friends and maybe even colleagues. Because when they're asking questions, suddenly they need answers and they can start to work together in order to do that. And to be fair, scientists recognize this and they normally do this. That's why in scientific language you always say like, oh, this suggests that so-and-so can be explained by whatever, so we're never totally conclusive. But how often do we do this in everyday life, in our own jobs, in the real world? Sometimes we're quite quick to try and explain things rather than asking questions. So I got the Zoom pop up, I've got to take this off.
You can press enter.
So yeah, let's try and take these conclusive questions to the next step. And this, in my opinion, is the beauty of asking questions with a variety of different viewpoints in mind. Suddenly, they start to interact with each other in an attempt to uncover new truths. And can we actually get closer to an ultimate truth by doing this? If we keep asking these questions, where will it eventually take us? Now, honestly, I was probably just hungry. That's the best honest answer that I can give. But jokes aside, what we started seeing was that we were trying to pursue the truth with a broadening of our scope. And what we were looking at was interdisciplinary thinking. Now, some quick definitions. Sometimes we get muddled up between multidisciplinarity and interdisciplinarity. Multidisciplinarity basically refers to when we look at a problem with different approaches. However, interdisciplinarity requires us to synthesize and combine approaches in order to try and explore a problem. And the questions that arise from interdisciplinary thinking have given rise to fantastic innovations all across the world. One prime example is the field of psychology. This emerged because of a synthesis between philosophy and biology. And when they came together, then we started to think about behaviors in the human mind and how it was responsible for that. And then in more practical applied senses, we got the field of machine learning and neural networks because we took neuroscience and computing and we put them together and started to develop computer models that were based off of the human brain and the human nervous system. And now, I mean, we have so many AI companies that help us with so many different things all around the world. And all of this emerged from interdisciplinary thinking. So imagine, like, what if those 5 psychologists became co-founders in a startup? Could you imagine, like, what kind of innovations it can start to give rise to? And if they were asking questions together, with that critical thinking in mind, where could they go? And this is exactly what we try to do at UMass. I'm trying to connect the dots back now. We try and tap into this thinking within our own product development process, and I'm going to give a quick few examples of what we do. But first, I'll explain everything that we do at UMass when it comes to measuring and monitoring mental health is to help the user make sense of their mental health. And how do we do this? Well, first, we help them understand how they feel. Next, we help them understand why they might feel this way. And then finally, we help them understand what it is that they can do to hopefully feel better. And we try our very, very best to be critical in this process, asking questions and using interdisciplinary thinking. So let's jump into a few examples. And as always, we're going to start with another question. The question here is, how might we know that we're actually building valuable features for our users? And our approach to do this uses a synthesis of business principles, but also the scientific research process in order to give us the confidence needed to explore this. Because when you actually look at it, the product development process exactly mirrors the scientific research methodology. You start with an observation, then you generate a hypothesis, you design an experiment to test that hypothesis, and once you have your data, you start to analyze that. You finally arrive at a conclusion, and then based off of that conclusion, you get a new unexplained question from what you learned. And, well, the product development process is really just the same. It's a one-to-one mirror. Okay, next question. How might we ensure that the feedback we get when developing the product is genuinely honest from the user? Well, what we do is we combine elements of Buddhist philosophy as well as anthropology to facilitate getting honest answers. So let me explain. In Buddhism, it's believed that there is no self, which we try our best to do as researchers in the product development process. The product is not a reflection of the people who build it, but rather it's just a reflection of the decisions that were made to develop that one particular feature based on the prior feedback of users. So when we start an interview, sometimes it's quite tempting to try and explain things or to try and push certain features that we're trying to explain, but we try to not interrupt, we try not to bias, and any feedback that we get, we then rephrase back to the user. For example, we might say, let me summarize what you said and please tell me if I understood this correctly. In this case, there is no ego and just observation, which is where the anthropology side comes in as well. Now, anthropologists are obsessed with explaining like the why of human behavior, And they do this by looking at language, looking at culture, looking at history, and by being able to have a look at the observations that we can make about human behavior and understanding the niche pieces of context that might influence or motivate a particular behavior, we can start to understand why there is motivation, why someone honestly wants to use a product or not use a product. And by thinking this way, we can start to look at the user and ask questions to understand why it didn't specifically work for them. So less ego, more empathy, and a lot more questions. Okay, last example. How might we ensure that the user clearly understands how the app works? So for this, we use practices from film and also from architecture to try and guarantee the understanding. So this one might seem a bit confusing. I'll give some context. When we have users go into the app for the very first time, once they're actually onboarded, we want to make sure that they know exactly what it is that they're getting into. So we want them to think that the way in which you use Umore is 100% intuitive to you. But in order to do that, we actually have to set the scene. And this is what brings us to film. Now, really good movies normally start with an opening shot or an opening sequence that frames exactly where you are. So this is one of my favorite examples. Anyone here seen 2001: A Space Odyssey? A few people. So it's basically a film directed by Stanley Kubrick. And in the opening shot, he has a shot of the moon emerging behind the Earth, emerging behind the sun. And it's a movie about man's sort of exploration into the universe, how they try and extend themselves across the stars. So instantly, we already know what this movie is going to be about. It takes us on a journey with them. So how might we do the same in the app so that someone who is instantly put into our first home screen understands what the actual point of the app is? And this is where architecture comes in. Now, I don't know if I'm going to be booed by saying this in Sweden, but IKEA really abuses this principle, but to be fair to them, they do so excellently. They consider the architecture of their warehouses to guide you through a maze until eventually you get to the end. And then once you get to the end, you end up buying a car full of goods that you didn't actually know that you needed. But this is the point. They thought about the floor space and they got the user to go to all the necessary points to complete the journey and get the full IKEA experience. So in terms of Umore, how might we set up the floor space, the digital floor space of the app, to make it so that people can go through that loop of understanding how they feel, why they feel that way, and what they can do to feel better. Hopefully doing it for good rather than for capitalism. And what has this resulted in? Well, these are just some of the ways that we try to use interdisciplinary critical thinking and asking questions. And I'm very thankful to say so that since we've been doing this, we have a 50% retention rate at 30 days, which is way above the industry average and standards. We also have 80% positive feedback on all of the self-care activities we have on the app. And then across iOS and Android, we have a combined 4.5 out of 5 App Store rating. So when we develop the product, we don't just look for shortcuts and we don't just follow industry examples. We try and suffer in that pocket of uncertainty that comes with not knowing, in an attempt to be truly critical. And that way, we don't have any direct answers. But in my opinion, this is really good because if you are suffering in uncertainty, you may soon learn something. And if we do learn something, it can improve the way that we currently do things. And I believe that this is what allows us to understand problems in a whole new way, critically focusing on the questions rather on the actual answers. So what if we all tried to be critical in this way, not judgments, instead questions? How might the world look like if we stopped looking for answers altogether and instead exclusively started looking for more questions? And staying true to the theme, time for the most important part of this presentation, let's open the floor to some more questions. Anyone at all?
Yeah, I've got some questions. Fantastic speech. I think you did an awesome delivery. I'm very, very interested in what you're working on here.
Thanks.
I really, really enjoyed it, first of all. The whole interdisciplinary thinking and using other industries to help with your product development process, like where did that concept come from in your company and what's your background?
If it's okay, I'll invert the question.
Yeah, go for
I
it.
think one leads to the other. My background is in science, so I come from like a research academic background, or blended research and entrepreneurship. And with a friend of mine actually in our last year of university, we set up like an interdisciplinary academic journal. And the purpose of that was that we thought that creative ideas came from this like synthesis.
Yeah.
So we had a look at all of the students who were doing research that combined, I don't know, let's say law and psychology, or two completely fields that shouldn't be talking to each other. And then what we realized was that these were the guys who, in like the conclusions and the outcomes of like the write-ups, were having like a lot of new innovative ideas which you don't normally get when it's just looking at things in a singular way. And well, that inspiration, we thought like, okay, why not use it within the product? And we have quite a creative team, a very diverse team as well, people from all over the world, people from all sorts of backgrounds, and it's kind of celebrating that diversity, that difference in thought that allows you to bring different ways of looking at things together, and from there, like, we might be creative enough to do something different, not for the purpose of it just being different, but for the purpose of it being better.
Yeah, because I kind of got this feeling that you didn't come from a product development background, just from the way that you speak, and I think it's really fascinating and smart to blend the different industries together. Yeah, so I think you're doing something really, really right here.
Thanks. Hopefully, I mean, it might be a double-edged sword. Who knows? we shall see. But I mean, the stats so far.
Yeah, I mean, the stats are good. People are satisfied. Keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you.